Wherever you are on your leadership voyage, it starts here.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Leadership Voyage, the podcast dedicated to your pursuit of becoming a great leader. You can check us out at leadership.voyage on the web, or you can email me, Jason Wick. The email address is startyourvoyage@gmail.com. I'm really hoping to encourage more of you to engage with me this year in Season 3. I'd love to hear what you think of the show, what you've learned, what you're not hearing enough of, who you'd like me to talk to, any of those things. Please go ahead and drop me an email. Don't be shy. startyourvoyage@gmail.com. So in this episode, I speak with Jess Gardner of Jess Gardner Coaching. She got started off as a teacher and was teaching English as a second language, has a career with design, and eventually becoming a coach, starting off helping designers with presenting their work. And what we talk about here today in this discussion is storytelling. What I like is, even though Jess's coaching is generally pretty specific, who she's working with and targeting, the principles around good storytelling are applicable in a variety of environments. And I think you'll see that come to the fore right away in this discussion. Before we get to my conversation with Jess Gardner, a reminder to check out the link at the bottom of the show notes for this podcast episode. You can go to Instacart and get free delivery on your first order of $35 or more. Groceries of your choosing, hand-picked by a shopper in your favorite grocery stores, brought to your doorstep in as fast as an hour. I'm a customer myself. In March, we had spring break, and it was just a crazy busy day or something, and I got Instacart delivered to my doorstep. It was fantastic. There was just so much going on, and we still needed to get groceries for someone visiting, and it was just a really handy thing to have. Without further delay, here's my conversation with Jess Gardner, talking about storytelling on Leadership Voyage. All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Leadership Voyage. I am lucky to be joined today by Jess Gardner of Jess Gardner Coaching. Jess, it's really nice to meet you today.
Thanks. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And you're one of the earliest guests we've had in this Season 3, and you're going to bring a really interesting topic to us all, and we're going to get to that in a second. It's something that I think we've never really talked about on the show, to be honest, so I'm excited for it. But before we do that, I was reading some information about you on your website, and it said that you have been to 14 different countries.
Yes.
I have got to hear about maybe one of the favorite places that you have been. Do you have anything?
Oh, well, I loved them all, but the place I stayed the longest was Macau. I lived and taught there for a year after grad school. So I was there about 10 months, an academic year, and it was such an amazing experience. I met so many wonderful people and got to visit a lot of different areas nearby, Hong Kong and Cambodia and mainland China. But Macau itself it's just such an interesting combination of cultures, with Portuguese and Chinese culture mixing. The food was incredible. I've been ruined. My Chinese food expectations are very high. So yeah, it was wonderful.
No, thanks for sharing that. I've never been anywhere close to there yet. I have been to Europe, but not that far. That sounds like a really interesting experience, and thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about what you do professionally, how you help other people on their professional journeys. And one of the angles here that'll be really interesting is storytelling.
Huh?
And before we start to get into storytelling and how it can apply to folks, could you maybe just give us a little quick a briefing on what it is you're up to and, kind of what are you passionate about?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I kind of took a circuitous route to get to where I am now, as many of us do. My original background was in art and design, And I tried doing that for a while, and it just wasn't turning into a full-time career. And so I did admin work for a while, and then I decided to go back to grad school, got a degree in teaching English as a second language, which I love and I'm very passionate about. I've always felt really strongly about good communication and the value of good communication and how to help people, talk about themselves and their work and tell their own stories. That all just kind of evolved down that path. And then in 2017, I got the opportunity to move away from the Bay Area for a couple of years and decided, hey, this is the perfect time to try my own business, to do my own thing. And so I decided to start teaching and coaching online. And through that experience, I kind of shifted the work that I do, partly because of the pandemic, because during that time, everybody was like trying to figure out what to do. And there were a lot of organizations looking for online speakers. And so I was like, why not? I'm going to give it a try. And so I offered a design organization a workshop kind of focused on how to talk about your work. And I was focused more on portfolio, but really what came out of it is I realized it's about storytelling. Really, that's the help people are looking for, because telling your own story can be very intimidating, even for people who do that kind of work professionally. And sometimes people just need a little more hand-holding or guidance or, direction to think about, like, okay, what makes my story unique? How can I leverage it to give myself as many opportunities as possible? So that's kind of how my work has evolved over the years. And I never get tired of talking about storytelling. It's such an interesting topic, and it's something everybody can relate to and everybody wants to get better at. So it's just been really fun for me to help people take more control of the stories they tell about themselves and their work.
That's wonderful. And I think we're going to have a good discussion anytime a guest says, I never get tired of talking about fill in the blank. That's great, right? That's really good news. I would say one thing that stood out to me there is you're talking about, some of your history teaching English as a second language. And you said on your website, you talk about, something like you're not like the big industry insider who's going to tell you about all these particular things, but I'm going to teach you. And I wrote down in my notes, teaching versus telling. Yeah. Would you be willing to expound on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think part of the value I bring that's different from sort of the standard coaching programs, at least in the design industry, is, I don't have that insider knowledge of Google or Meta, but I'm a trained teacher. I have a master's degree. I know, and I teach people with a different language background. So you really have to be able to break things down into a way that's easy to understand, that's not intimidating, that helps people feel comfortable with the learning process and taking the risks necessary to grow and improve. And that's what coaching's all about. And so it's just kind of a shift in the method and the audience, but really all the skills that I've learned in my teaching career, I apply every day in my coaching.
Yeah, interesting. And so when we talk about storytelling, and you talked about, it started with a workshop with some designers and we're helping them talk about their portfolios. Mm-hmm. But let's step back a little bit. Let's zoom out a little bit and talk about, storytelling here. And what are the different contexts that listeners could be applying the storytelling principles that we're going to discuss today? How could they use them in their lives? Like, how could they envision this, do you think?
Mm-hmm. Well, presentations is a big one. A lot of people despise public speaking. I hear about this all the time, how much people, dread it or feel anxious about it or don't feel confident about their public speaking opportunities, whether that's like contributing to weekly meetings or giving, talks at conferences, whatever it is. It's something a lot of people don't feel great about doing. And we've all been to terrible presentations. It's not fun. It's not fun to listen to. It's not fun to be
No, it's not.
the bad presentation giver. So trying to help people find better ways to do that, I think, that can apply to pretty much any industry and any level, really. I mean, it's very important, obviously, for leaders to be able to inspire the people that they're talking to. You don't want to just present as like, well, I'm the leader of this organization, so you have to do what I say, like, okay, sure, but that's not the best way to get engagement or buy-in from your audience. If you can inspire them and engage with them and connect with them, it's obviously you're going to be a lot more effective.
I think you said a really important word to me, trying to think about this topic through different kind of scenarios for different people. And the word you said was audience. Okay. So how do we kind of look at our audience and kind of identify maybe what it is they might be thinking about, wondering about, what's important to them, right? And how do we kind of cater whatever it is we might be doing to this particular group of people?
Yeah. Well, I think there are different ways. And I always encourage people who are preparing to do some kind of storytelling, whether it's a presentation or an interview or whatever it might be, you want to do some research, you want to prepare, you want to really sit down and think about, okay, who specifically is my audience? Because a lot of us tend to speak to we try to speak to everybody instead of narrowing down and being specific and thinking about, okay, really, who is my audience? If this is your own team or your own, the people you work with every day, that makes it a little easier because probably you already have a relationship with them, hopefully. You probably know what their goals are. You probably know what their concerns are. You probably can observe the types of things that motivate them or frustrate them. And so taking the time to really think about those motivations or those concerns will help you think about, okay, so what do they need from me? What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? What's my goal in telling this story? And once you kind of identify those things, like your own goal, the goal of your audience, what questions they might have or concerns they might have about the story you're telling, then that can help direct you in terms of, okay, so how can I accomplish this goal? How do I want to make them feel when they're listening to me? How do I want to motivate them? How do I want to, lead them through the process of whatever I'm explaining to make sure it's clear and people aren't just going to tune out by giving them a big info dump? There are a lot of things you can do to prepare and be thoughtful so that you get that connection with your audience.
Thanks. That's a lot of information, I think, just to think through, Jess. No, that's really good because, you kind of started off, you're talking about maybe just in the broad sense, of course, we need to prepare and then we need to really identify who it is we're talking to. And I mean, like you're saying in the example of your own team, it's kind of a forehead slapper, I suppose. You're like, well, yeah, of course. Okay, I know these folks, but it could be any group of people. And then I like this. So now we're narrowing in on, what's our goal in having this presentation or this discussion. Actually, I got to say, I kind of like that in general, because it makes me go like, why am I having this meeting? Like period. Actually, is there a purpose to this meeting? So I like that. What are their questions? What are their concerns? Trying to anticipate these things. And then I really like this at the end. What is it I'm trying to have them feel? How do I want to lead them through this so that they're engaged? So I think that really sets the stage really nicely for us to kind of get into I have a handful of questions here and we'll just go until I run out of time, I guess, but about like techniques, right? Hopefully we can all take the backdrop of your answer right there and then start talking about some specific things. So the first question I was thinking about, we're going to go kind of chronologically, maybe through a storytelling. Okay. What are some creative ways that you can grab your audience's attention right from the beginning of your story?
Yes, that's an important one because you got to hook them early if you want to keep people engaged because we've all sat through terrible meetings, terrible presentations, we think we know what's going to happen, or maybe we're expecting it to be bad, depending on the situation. It's easy to kind of tune out and think about other stuff. But if you do something unexpected or do something that brings out some curiosity in your audience right away, engage them somehow, make them do something. Don't let them just sit there, find a way to grab them right away, either by, and if you think about some of the great stories we've all seen and heard, even in a movie, usually there's something exciting that happens right away to drag you in. There's some action, there's a conflict, there's something. Your presentation doesn't have to start with, well, today we're going to, don't do what everybody else does. Do something different, think about the best way to grab your audience and shoot for that. Don't shoot for like, this is how every single person starts a meeting. You want to, of course, you want to like give an agenda, you want to follow sort of norms, but start with something exciting. TED Talks are great examples of how to do this. Pique their curiosity, pull them in with something they don't expect, share a conflict, share a sort of action snippet of like, here's what's going on, something to drag them in and make them care right away.
No, great. Thank you. And I mean, I think you've already listed just 4, 5, 6 things right here where someone listening could say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and try this. How much, I don't know if this is the right word, like how much courage does it take for somebody to try what you're saying if others are used to them running a meeting or having a presentation a certain way?
Right. It does take courage. Absolutely. And I don't want to make it seem like, oh, this is so easy. Just go change everything, And especially if you're in a leadership position and people are used to you doing things a certain way, you don't want to like totally turn it on its head. But what I often suggest is, you can observe people that you think are strong presenters, strong storytellers, and try to notice, how do they do it? What are they doing? Are there things they are doing that I would feel comfortable doing? And just kind of observe and decide for yourself, first of all, kind of like, what are the bounds of what's available to me or what I'm comfortable with? And then just, go incrementally, maybe set some goals for yourself. Because the goal of a meeting or a presentation shouldn't just be, info dump. Like I was saying, you want to achieve something. You want to motivate people, probably. You want to solve a problem. But you might also have personal goals. And I encourage this with my clients. If there's something in particular that you've struggled with, find some small thing you can do to improve that area and see if you can do it. You don't want to try to do 100 things at once, of course. You don't want to do something radical, but identify some goals for yourself and say, okay, for this meeting, I really want to try something different with my introduction. I really want to try something different with my hook. Just one small thing, and see how it goes. See if people respond. And if people are like, whoa, no, then okay, try something else. But if people seem engaged, then great. That's great feedback. It's very easy to see right away, if people are responding positively, but you won't know if you don't take some small risks. Yeah. And if that feels too scary, try it out on somebody first. Find somebody in your circle that you're comfortable with and bounce it off of them, see what they think.
That's wonderful stuff, Jess. Thank you. And I love it because you're also identifying maybe a personal goal. Maybe I'm working on this particular part of my speaking or my facilitation or whatever it is that you're talking about here. And how can I work on, maybe in this particular instance, we're talking about how we're hooking our audience, and how can I work on that, something small? I mean, that's comfortable enough, right? Any growth is uncomfortable, right? I mean, but I think you're also giving us really nice graduated versions of kind of like, hey, or progressive versions of, okay, we'll start here. Oh, that's too uncomfortable. Start here. I think that's great. That's great stuff. I mean, I've already got I could just walk away here personally with 10 action items. So thanks. This is I'm so happy I have this podcast. Okay. So we talked a little bit about grabbing attention, right? Creative ways and also pragmatic approaches to trying to implement that. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. How about, I would say quite commonly, in the info dump scenario, maybe we're going chronologically. It's something people are comfortable with. We follow the beginning to the end of a story. But you also mentioned earlier that, it's important to engage and hold attention. Mm-hmm. What if we want to tell a story in kind of an unconventional way or a non-linear approach? Do you have any devices to suggest here about how we could try something like that and still keep people's attention and clarity?
Yeah, absolutely. Just because something happened in a chronological way and we're all used to that method of learning doesn't mean that's the only way, of course. And it's probably not the most exciting way, unless the thing that started you on the project is really exciting or really interesting, or, maybe there's a conflict or a problem, then it might be appropriate. But maybe it was something really boring and the most interesting part of the process came at like the 2/3 mark. Well, you don't want to make everybody sit through 20 minutes before you get to the interesting part, right? I mean, I feel like a lot of podcasts do this well. Like they'll grab the most interesting snippet of the podcast and put that first to get you to listen, because otherwise people are like, wait, what's this about? Oh, I don't know. I'm only 2 minutes in, but I'm giving up, because I haven't figured it out yet. Same thing, hook them with that right away. Somehow take the most interesting thing and tease it up front. And that could be a problem you're trying to solve. It could be some sort of a conflict or challenge. It could be something unexpected that happened that, either a result that you got or something that kind of maybe is giving you a new direction or options, and it might connect to whatever the call to action is going to be. Like, you could tie it to your goal. What is it that you want your audience to do, or what is it that you want them to feel? And how can the way I begin this story guide them to that? So, being very strategic about it is great if you can do that. So, and there again, if you think about some of the great stories, movies, books, whatever, you start with the action. Every good James Bond movie starts with a fight or, whatever it is to pull you in and make you care. And you can do the same thing. Just make sure you have a structure in place, because the last thing you want to do is to make people feel confused or lost or like, why are we talking about this? And now we're talking about this. It can be overdone, certainly. But most of us understand the convention of storytelling very well. That's one of the beautiful things about it is we all know a good story when we hear it, and we kind of know what to expect. So as long as your audience feels safe and knows what to expect, you can play around with it. You can play around with the order or the way that you present things. You just have to give some structure. And that can be by saying, an interesting thing happened during this project, and I'm going to tell you this part, and then I'm going to tell you about how we got there. Or, give them a little bit of clarity so people know, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. Or use transitions, 3 weeks ago, XYZ, and then, this is what happened after, something like that. There are a lot of just little guideposts that you can give your audience to help them feel comfortable, feel like they know what's going on, but still feel interested and engaged because it's something different.
Yeah. Thank you. I like that. The guideposts at the end. That's really a good point. Or the device of transitions to get from one place to the next. And again, I like how you're tying this back to the strong kind of hooking someone in the beginning, that it doesn't have to be truly chronological. It's almost as if you can take that action and lead with it, and maybe even use that as a teaser to, hey, we're going to get to this, whatever that is. Cool. Yeah. I mean,
sorry,
go
can
ahead.
I add one little thing?
Yeah, of course.
I think the other thing too is that in addition to the chronological piece, people feel like when they're telling about a project sometimes or describing something that happened over time, that they have to tell every part of the story, even if it's not interesting or important or relevant. And that is not true. So, being selective is also a big part of this, not only maybe changing the order, but choosing to edit some stuff. You can leave some stuff out if it's not actually helping you, and it's going to lose, if it's going to bring the energy way down, or people are going to get lost or bored or tune out. That's the last thing you want. If you've started with a strong opening and you've built that momentum, you want to keep it. And you got to be a little selective sometimes to make that happen.
I love it. And I think that goes back to what you were saying up top about really understanding your audience. I mean, some folks, those details might be perfectly relevant for what they care about. But again, it's predicated on understanding what that audience wants, right?
Yes. And reading the room, I think, too.
Reading the room. So I do have to ask you, one thing I was working on personally in 2020 was working on the skill of global listening, or 3D listening, right? Which is listening to things beyond verbal and in an entire room. And then, of course, we went to all virtual, and it was like, okay, this is an entirely different thing.
It's hard.
Reading the room virtually. Do you have any tips on that? I would love to hear them. And I'm sure folks can identify with running virtual meetings and not having a clue what others are thinking.
Yeah, that is really hard. It's true. I mean, ideally, it's great to have, even if you can't look at everybody who's in the meeting, if there are some people with their willing to put their cameras on, if you have some allies or, friends within the group that you're talking to that you can use, because even if it's just to build your own confidence, or to kind of see how things are landing, especially somebody friendly, maybe have one friendly person and one person that's maybe more of a tough sell if you can, if you only have positive people, then, you might have a false sense of how it's going, but just something to give you confidence and courage, because that's going to be the main thing that drives the experience, I think, to make sure that you're putting out positive energy. And if you have even just a couple people that you can look at and connect with, it's going to be so much more powerful and effective, I think, than, if you're just looking at all black screens. It's so hard. And I feel that way too. And, this is what I do. And I totally get it. So, even just being able to see you and chat right now is so much better than, if I were just talking to, when I've got my slides up or something and it's just like nothing. That's really tough. So, I would just try to, if it's your decision, try to set it up so that you can see at least a handful of people. And if someone else is facilitating, ask them, I guess, if that's a possibility. Maybe you can at least even see the hosts. I recently gave a workshop where I could only see the hosts, but there were 5 of them. So that was still like a great mix of people, enough to help me feel confident about reading the room.
I love it. No, I thank you for adding that, because sometimes it also just feels like, maybe something's out of our control. But even this part that's in your control, you're calling out here is, well, we could just ask, hey, could some people be visible, or whatever that looks like. So I love it. Wonderful. Which are helping you have more odds of a successful storytelling experience, which in turn will make it more positive for all the people in your audience, right?
Exactly.
Love it. It strikes me that's one particular thing that makes a story effective is if the listener or the audience is able to conjure some kind of imagery sometimes. And so I'm wondering, do you have techniques you could share, maybe how people can select solid word choice or something in this area to help create vivid imagery for their audiences?
Definitely. Yeah. And it's really important. This one in particular, I think, is important. If you're leading a meeting, or, if you're talking to a group, you want people to see your vision, of course, but it's also important in telling your own story. So, a lot of the folks that I work with in my coaching business are job hunters, or they're trying to level up their careers somehow, get promoted, whatever it is. And part of that is exactly what you said, helping people to imagine what you're doing, how you bring value. And the way that you approach that, there's a few ways. Part of it's the words that you choose. So people tend to, when they're talking about themselves, especially, I think it's because we're trying to seem professional, or maybe it's intimidating. People tend to get really formal in the way that they write and the way they talk about themselves. And that's not always the best, because it's harder to connect with your audience if you're too formal and standoffish. So use action verbs. People tend to use passive voice in that situation. Like, let me think of an example. Instead of saying, I did XYZ, you might say, oh, well, XYZ took place. Passive voice. You're totally gone from the story now. Like, there's no you. You don't want that. You want to take credit. You want to show what you did. Put yourself right in the center there. So using active voice, and even if it's not your story, even if you're talking, about a project or something, anytime you can use action words, it's so much easier to envision than passive. We can all imagine what research looks like. We can all imagine what, working extra hours looks like, or, brainstorming or meeting with colleagues, whatever it is. Using action helps us envision that much more effectively. Another thing you can do is, because you're trying to elicit some type of feeling in your audience, is think about the words that evoke emotion. So trying to get people in the feels, as they say, trying to think about, okay, how can my audience resonate with this? How can I talk about this in a way that helps them imagine what this feels like? Use those words, to talk about what you're passionate about, or why you're frustrated, or what kind of a scenario happened to your users, or whatever it might be, so that we can relate and feel something and care more about the outcome, and maybe want to feel, be motivated to want to do something. So action words, emotion type words, and then also using analogies or scenarios that people can easily see in their mind's eye. Because, if it's too abstract or if it's just, again, sort of info dump, like report style information, we don't care, really. So try to give a scenario, show something that happened to a real person, or, explain what's happening on your team and describe it in a way that you can see in your mind's eye. And if that is too hard to do, try to think about whether there's an analogy. One of the things that I use in my social media sometimes is adding storytelling as a spice, because people will often come to me and say, oh, I've got this presentation or I've got this case study and it's really boring and I want to add more storytelling. How can I add more storytelling? And I'm like, it's very hard to add storytelling at the end like it's some kind of a spice. It is a main ingredient. You need to start with it from the beginning if you want a good outcome, because the whole story is built on these principles and you can't just shake it on at the end. That doesn't work. And that's a thing that a lot of people can relate to. If you know anything about cooking, that analogy makes sense, I think. So finding a way to help your audience feel something, see the action, and then relate to it in some kind of tangible way that they can imagine.
What a great answer. I mean, again, just like one of the earlier answers about how we can begin a storytelling process with our audience. I mean, I think you're giving us, so many things that we can try out here, Jess. So thank you for all of that. So action verbs, evoking emotion, analogies, and then at the end, they're talking about storytelling as a spice, not really working as effectively as building it into the process. I love it. No, it's great. I mean, I've never spoken to someone about storytelling in this way. So you're obviously not. You obviously have given this so much thought and worked with so many people about it. It's wonderful to hear all of this roll right out.
Thank you.
I can't believe we're already coming up to almost a half hour of talking. So before we start to wrap this all up and let everybody hear about where they can reach out to you and engage with you, I ask everybody who comes on the show the same question. And it's, what is something that you've learned recently?
Yeah, that is a good question. My husband is also a trainer. He works in healthcare, but they're trying to get into more e-learnings at his job. And so he recently purchased Articulate, the e-learning. There's Rise, and then there's also Storyline is what it's called. And it's a way to create e-learning educational materials, learning and development type of materials. And there are a lot of folks who offer online courses as a part of their coaching, and that's something that I've considered in the past. And so I recently started kind of playing around with his copy of Articulate Storyline to see if that's something that will be useful for me in my coaching business. But just as an educator, it's an amazing tool, and it's been really fun to play with it and kind of see the different ways that it can make the learning process more engaging and more, gamified, fun. Because we've all sat through terrible, terrible, boring e-learnings. And so, there again, an opportunity to make something fun and interesting and make the audience want to do it instead of forcing them to do it. I feel like that's a great teaching tool. So I'm curious to see if there's any ways that I can use that in my business.
Yeah, thanks for sharing what you're learning about there. And then also maybe you can have a positive systemic effect on e-learning. Maybe you could help us all out.
Yeah, I know. There's some terrible ones out there.
The modules, it's just clicking. No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Uh-huh.
So we've talked a lot about storytelling today, and for those who are listening, they've got at least a dozen things they could probably go ahead and try to stretch themselves and ultimately get better results by engaging their audiences, whether it's interviewing for a job, working with their team, or giving a presentation, or beyond that, I'm sure. But thank you for giving so many specific ideas for people to go ahead and try on their own. I think people can get a lot out of this, Jess.
Yay.
So for those who have been intrigued by this, might be interested in working with you, learning more about what it is you're up to these days, where should we direct them?
Well, my website is jessgardnercoaching.com. Pretty easy. Also, that's my LinkedIn handle, so you're welcome to follow me or message me there. I do have a newsletter with a little freebie on my website, and I'm in the process actually of kind of updating my site and tweaking my freebie and my packages a little bit right now. It should be all in place by the time your episode airs, so I don't want to give it away right this second, but there will be new exciting stuff there very soon. But yeah, there's a freebie you can sign up to get my usually 2 times a month newsletter, and I offer just single one-on-one coaching sessions, but I'm trying to move more towards these new packages because I feel like they create a better overall experience for people than just like a one-off last minute thing. So yeah, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or check out my website. That would be great. I'd love to chat with somebody new.
Cool. That sounds great. And all of that will be in the episode notes. So it'll just have to be one click away.
Yay.
Jess Gardner, great to meet you today. And thanks for giving us so many actionable things with regard to storytelling. Have yourself a great rest of the day. It's nice to see you today.
Yes, thank you so much. It was really fun.
Hope you all enjoyed that conversation with Jess Gardner. I certainly did. Really, one of a conversation of all the people I've spoken with on the podcast going back these 3 years, it's really one where I think I took away the most actionable, the number of actionable things that I could do, which I hope you all felt that as well. We have opportunities to speak in so many different settings at work on a weekly basis. The opportunities to improve on that skill are all over the place. As someone who has led, I can't even imagine how many meetings and spoken at conferences several times, I learned so much in this discussion with Jess. So I really hope that you share that feeling as well. A quick reminder on two important things. Number one, I'd love to hear from you at startyourvoyage@gmail.com. What do you like about the shows so far? What do you wish was different? Who do you want to hear from? Who do you want me to talk to? I'd love to hear any ideas or opinions you have, so please reach out, startyourvoyage@gmail.com. And secondly, a reminder, if you want to support the show, go ahead to the show notes, scroll to the bottom, and click that link for Instacart, and give it a try. It's free delivery on your first order of $35 or more. Groceries delivered right to your doorstep. So here's your show summary from my discussion with Jess. First, when does storytelling matter? Well, it matters during presentations, public speaking, meetings. Essentially, we want to inspire others through engagement and connection, and that's why storytelling matters. Your audience, prepare for them. Understand who they are specifically. Identify what is your goal and what are the questions and concerns of your audience. Try to anticipate them. What do you want to make your audience feel, and where do you want to lead them? These are all the questions you need to answer to prepare for your audience. How to grab your audience's attention? Well, you want to hook them early. Do something unexpected. Engage their curiosity. Have them get involved in some form. Trying something new does take courage. You can watch TED Talks, identify strong presenters that you like and model yourself after them. Set your own goals for your storytelling. Be willing to try something and take quick feedback on that. Practice on someone in your inner circle if that's the level of comfort you need. Talking about non-linear storytelling, just because something happened chronologically, it doesn't mean that that's the only way to present it. Try leading with an unexpected result that you had, or tease something up front with the most interesting thing that you uncovered. Have a structure or use transitions or guideposts. You don't have to tell every detail. Remember that. Understand your audience. And then we talked about imagery as well. Quite often, Jess suggested that we're too formal in our language. Use action verbs instead of passive voice to include yourself. Think about words that evoke emotion so that the audience can relate. You're trying to get them to do something or act on something. And use analogies that can help people envision something. So there is your show summary for today. Until next time, everybody take care.